Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if you have your sun in Scorpio and Aquarius rising. This is quite an interesting combination. I was going to say difficult because I do think that these two signs, because they are so different, that they can create a lot of confusion for both the person who possesses this combination as well as other people. Because remember that your rising sign is kind of like your calling card. It's how you behave when you're in social situations. It can be your appearance, it can be your mannerisms. Then you have the sun sign, which is your aspirational self. What do you want to become like? What kind of goals do you want to reach? What is your core personality? The rising sign will give some insights into personality, but they're really, to me, more like coping mechanisms. You were raised a certain way, and so you kind of like habitually do certain things based on that way that you were raised. So when we talk about this combination, we're looking at somebody who may have, as a Scorpio individual, you may have been raised in a very laissez-faire environment, meaning that maybe you didn't have a lot of typical, because it's like conventional ways of child rearing. Maybe you were left to your own devices, not necessarily out of neglect, because you might have had parents, or at least one parent, who treated you like a little adult and maybe kind of even glossed over your emotions. So look to your moon sign to see about your relationship with your mother, okay? Because that will kind of tip the scales in one way or the other. If your moon sign, let's say your moon sign as a Scorpio is in Pisces, then there might have been more of an emotional, at least with that mother figure, there might have been more emotions displayed. Now, that doesn't mean that it was a healthy situation, but at least it kind of gives some sort of modeling about emotions to begin with. Because sometimes children, if they come from, if you're like a water sign and you have intellectual parents, they can emotionally or psychologically bypass, because they kind of like use their mind as an escape route for not dealing with feelings very much. So, the air signs are not only Aquarius, but Libra and Gemini, and they may intellectualize or over intellectualize their emotions and kind of be very analytical about them, and do the same with their children. And that doesn't help very much, because it kind of gives the impression that emotions shouldn't be felt, they should be thought about. And that's not true. I mean, we have to feel our feelings, or otherwise it can be almost like robotic, where we're just kind of going through the motions, and it can actually create a lot of disconnect between the reality of our situation and how we feel about it. And the mind and we could say the ego, or the part of the mind that is not connected to a higher source, that is just kind of running its programs, loves to justify things. And that keeps it in a loop. It keeps it doing the same thing over and over again. And obviously, I mean, it stands to reason that that's not going to be very helpful if people don't do things that are actually going to lead them to make positive changes in their life. So the mind, we can befriend the mind But if we allow the mind to run the show, then a lot of times you'll see people kind of, it's not so much making excuses for something, but they just have a tendency to live in this abstract way that is disconnected from the reality of the situation. So anyway, let's start with the rising sign. So when somebody is Aquarius rising, they will tend to be very interested in not conforming to others. So even in a situation like, I use this example of tattoos, which is kind of lame in the sense that a lot of people are getting tattoos these days. I'm way behind the times on this. I don't have any tattoos, you know what I mean? So that's why I say these kinds of things. And I never will get a tattoo, but a lot of people do. Well, what about if someone was living in an environment where there were a lot of people who are dressed as hippies or, kind of alternative in some way? This person might be very preppy or very kind of more on the conservative level. And that's how they express their individuality, because they don't want to conform to a group, which is ironic, or you could say contrarian in and of itself, because Aquarius rules the 11th house, which is the house of groups and the collective, you know what I mean? So it always amuses me to think of Aquarians who don't want to be part of the very thing that they represent. So I can't say one particular look that somebody with Aquarius rising would have. I always think of like somebody like Janis Joplin, but that was, of course, that was in the 60s. So in her day, that was how you are different. But see, for somebody like Janis, this was a big deal because her sun sign was Capricorn and her moon sign was Cancer. And both of these signs, they're opposing signs, but they're both very traditional. And she grew up in an area that was very, in Texas, that was very traditional, I would say. I'm saying very traditional. I don't know, traditional enough. And being different was mocked, not trusted, like those kinds of people who would wear those kinds of clothing must be like X, Y, and Z. And so she suffered because of it. But she actually had a period of time where she had, in the early 60s, I believe, way before she became a star, but where she went to San Francisco, to an area that was known to be kind of a beatnik community, which was the precursor to the hippies. This was before the hippies, but it was the same kind of vibe that was kind of counterculture. And she got involved in meth. Or I don't know what they called it then, but like speed, amphetamines. And she got so scared that she came back home and she began to dress very conservatively. Now that was a reaction to getting very out of control, but obviously it didn't last very long, and she eventually went back to being that kind of what we would call like a trendsetter, because when you look at the kind of outfits that she actually had people make for these costumes, yes, there were other people wearing that kind of clothing, but this was not widespread. Until the 70s, people did not dress like hippies for the most part. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize. And so she was really kind of like forward in her self-expression in that way. And this is what Aquarius as a sign is all about, is like being I keep forgetting the term that you would use, like the future, the person who is ahead of their time, let's put it that way. And this can apply to your appearance. So the trendsetter, let's put it that way. And so you might be that kind of person, and you might be dressing differently than other people, and it might even lead to kind of getting um, ribbed a little bit for it because other people just think it's crazy. And then soon enough, other people are following your lead, or you're just kind of, there's like an intuitive quality about Aquarius. But I would say, especially having the pulse, your finger on the pulse of humanity. And that's what being a trendsetter is all about. And then, other people following later on. So I can't just narrow it down to one particular look. But if I had to make a choice, I would say the bohemian or the hippie kind of look, whatever the modern version is these days. You may be, I was going to say, you might be kind of neurodivergent. You might appear to other people to be different in some way beyond your physical appearance. You just seem unusual. And that's why I said neurodivergent, somebody who thinks differently. That's going to really depend on other factors, like, aspects to Mercury, for instance. If you have Mercury, making aspect to Uranus, that could be a good sign that that's true. But I'm including it because sometimes this affects how somebody acts. Like, for instance, if somebody has autism, sometimes they will also have mannerisms that go along with it that are different than what is typically done, and so it sets them apart. And you could say this about other types of situations. It might even be that there's something unusual about your family that sets them apart. And so you're part of them, so you come across the same way. Like, for instance, if somebody is a Mormon and they grow up in this kind of a different type of environment where there aren't Mormons, or I'm thinking when I was a kid, there was a girl, I don't know what her religion was, but she wore like a bonnet. And this is like suburban Chicago, so that, people, they weren't wearing bonnets and Little House on the Prairie dresses like that. And she was, and she didn't like it. So there's a bit of a difference, because you're going to like being different. So even if your whole family is like that, you're going to, well, I shouldn't say you're going to like it, because these two signs, Scorpio and Aquarius, they do form a square. Technically, it will be within a certain degree span. So it's not going to be for all of you that your sun squares your ascendant. But for those who do, it is going to be a frustrating aspect, because, well, squares are, but I mean, it's going to be a frustrating situation because you're going to feel misunderstood continuously growing up, because people are going to assume you're one way when you're another, when you're really not that way. And, the girl that I was talking about, she didn't like standing out like that. And I never have forgotten her, because I know that she was like, her and her family were an anomaly based on whatever their religion was. It was like Mennonite or something, I think. But I don't know for sure. It looked kind of like Amish. But obviously the Amish wouldn't be going to a public school. So it was probably like Mennonite. And so I think when people have Aquarius rising, they like to shock people. This may be more true for you when you're younger and you're more tied into your rising sign. When you get past your first Saturn return, if you're somebody in your 30s or beyond, reflect back to when you were younger, and do you still feel that same rebellious quality? Chances are that you've mellowed out and you are more kind of like accepting your Scorpio nature. And how, speaking of that, how this can also manifest is that when you're younger, you may feel like very detached, and this can run the gamut of why, because I do feel that people that are born under water signs may experience trauma in a much more profound way, a much stronger way, and it can have a more traumatizing effect on them. And because of that, when you have Aquarius rising, you may give the impression that nothing phases you. You might come across as very, very detached. But it really couldn't be further from the truth. And it's only a facade. When people get to know you, they might be actually quite shocked that you are very sensitive. Scorpios tend not to want to broadcast that. So you might still be secretive about it and try to hide the fact that you are. And especially if you have other inner planets in Scorpio, like Venus, Mercury, or Mars, that will possibly enhance that scorpionic influence. And your moon sign can be anything. So that's what I was saying, like if you have the moon in air, then this will really make you reluctant to deal with your feelings. And you might even project, you might even deflect, and until you get to a certain point where you realize that you have to deal with the shadow. That Scorpio is the sign, and the 8th house is Scorpio's domain in astrology that really specialize in the shadow. So it's not something that a Scorpio person can't wrap their brain around and deal with. It's just that you have to go there. And it might be something that if you did suffer a lot of trauma, it might take you years to fully realize the importance of dealing with it. Because if you have a lot of air, it can be very easy to bypass. And if you have Libra placements, inner planets, for instance, or the moon in Libra, you can kind of charm your way out of dealing with your heavy emotions. And same with Gemini, kind of that jokey type of thing. As a matter of fact, I don't know about Roseanne Barr's rising sign, but her sun is Scorpio and her moon is Gemini. She's like one of my favorite comedians. I love her type of humor, and it's very perceptive, and it's very deep, but it's also very irreverent. It's kind of flippant. And so it's like those both sides of things. And she did say she experienced trauma when she was growing up. So this kind of thing can initially make somebody run away, but then when they kind of embrace it, they can be very good at getting to the core wounds and things like that. As a matter of fact, this would be I think if other factors support it, like the moon sign, for instance, I usually don't talk about the rising sign as it pertains to professions. I would talk more about the sun sign in Scorpio. But if the sun is in Scorpio, and if you have the moon in air, this might be very and Aquarius rising, you might be like a great psychotherapist or some other type of mindset coach or life coach or something along those lines. But in general, I would say that, Scorpio as a sign really wants to transform themselves. But also, in terms of what kind of work you want to do, I feel that transformation is also something that you are really keen on. So anything that involves, whether it's therapy, whether it's even if you are somebody who is very into fitness, then maybe it would be a personal trainer. Maybe it would be like a mindset coach. There is an unusual quality that you bring to the table because of that rising sign. And this can be very attention getting. And if you play your cards right, if you're somebody who is aware of this and you use it to your greatest potential, and based on other influences, obviously, this combination could be somebody who showcases the desire for personal freedom, but also the ability to be very deep. You know, sometimes people, they don't want to get too intense about certain subjects and things, and they can be very shallow. They can kind of like be silly, and they really don't bring much to the table in terms of helping other people to learn how to manage their feelings. But when a person is able to have that detachment, which is really good for being objective, rather than that person that's so subjective, they always view things from their own personal lens, that is very helpful. And I think this combination can make it more possible. Also, another thing to note is that Aquarius is a masculine sign, and Scorpio is a feminine sign because of the elements of water is feminine and air is masculine. So on the surface, this type of person is very, people oriented. However, there is that side that doesn't necessarily want to just always be constantly social and surrounded by other people. You may have people that you really prefer to be with. I think Aquarius is less specific about that. There is that kind of universal quality. So it's really the best of both worlds in a sense. Because if you get somebody who is a Scorpio sun sign, and let's say they have Cancer rising, they might be more clannish, meaning that they tend to like socialize with their family or maybe some old friends that they've known forever, and they don't like new things. It's like the person who always has their favorite dishes and they don't stray far from them. Maybe they don't eat a variety of foods. And that's how I see this type of mentality when it applies to other things in life. There's an experimental quality with Aquarius, although, the part of that contrarian energy of Aquarius is it's a fixed sign. So you can have Aquarians who are very stubbornly, having to be different, but also there are some areas where they do like the constancy, where they're not constantly changing, because, mutable signs are the ones that are the most comfortable with change and variety, quite honestly, the way I see it. So anyway, I think with the sun in Scorpio, you're going to have a person who is rather secretive. Aquarius, I would hesitate to say, oh, Aquarius is an open book like Sagittarius, because Aquarius is detached, and therefore Aquarians would not necessarily spill their guts to people. They really wouldn't have the guts to spill in a lot of ways. They wouldn't be that kind of overly emotional person in the first place. They would really try to kind of make everything very nice and neat in these in their mind, that they categorize things without having to make it messy and like emotional or anything along those lines. But you're not an Aquarius. You're a Scorpio with Aquarius rising. So it's like trying to keep the lid on something. And even though I would normally really talk about the moon sign in terms of the emotions, because Scorpio is a water sign, that's going to seep into the emotional nature regardless, where the person is very emotionally intense. Maybe it's kind of like kept under wraps, but it still exists. There can be, with some Scorpios who are less evolved, and maybe, who knows, maybe even temptations with those who are more evolved, of perhaps having resentment about certain things that have happened, and being like that person has to experience karmic blowback. They cannot get away with this. So at the very least, being like wanting to see justice. And if you have Mars in Scorpio, but Libra is a sign that's connected with justice and the law, then that can be something that really is a driving force in your life. And then contrast that to the Aquarius energy, which is very laissez-faire and is just kind of like detached and not intense towards a particular person. Maybe being able to see reasons, finding reasons for why people do what they do. And in terms of relationships, being more concerned about the collective and relating to people as groups rather than one-on-one, which what your sun sign is really all about. You're not the kind of person that treats everyone like they're the same. You are very preferential towards those people that you feel are more in alignment with you, and for whatever reason you deem them more important to you in your life. An Aquarius person, and I'm not saying that you are an Aquarius, but you do have that influence to some degree, can be very non-possessive. Unlike, Scorpio can be jealous, can be wanting to be totally bonded with somebody, both physically and emotionally, spiritually. And Aquarius is somebody that doesn't believe that we own our partner. Even if you're married, even if you have a ring, you have this tangible proof, a document that says that you're married to somebody. That's not what Aquarius is about. And that may mean that when you're younger, you do tend to get involved with multiple people, or just stay away from relationships altogether, because like I was thinking of free love, which really was free sex in a lot of ways. That was part of the 60s, but also that was nothing new. Like, you might call it polyamory, but it's really not even polyamory, in the sense that polyamory, from what I understand, it's actual relationships. It's not just, group sex or open marriage, which doesn't mean that you're necessarily cultivating a one-on-one relationship with somebody outside of your marriage. It's just like it could be a one-night stand, but your partner knows that this is how it's done between the two of you. and they're down for it, you know what I mean? So that kind of thing that's not what Scorpio is all about. Scorpio is very interested in monogamy, one-on-one. So there could be some kind of conflicts here. I do believe that, well, first of all, look at your moon, look at your Venus, see what signs they're in, see if it supports more of the Aquarian energy or more of the Scorpio energy. But I just think in general, this could be something that you grow out of as you get older if you had a tendency to be non-committal. Because Aquarius wants freedom, that's a very big deal to Aquarius. And they're not necessarily interested in marriage anyway, because that might feel too confining. Scorpio, that's something, if they could seal the deal, Scorpio's down for that. Plus, I think Scorpio is pretty traditional, although Scorpio is kind of a wild card of all the water signs in that way. Maybe because it's also ruled by Mars along with Pluto. But anyway, so I don't typically think that the rising sign would necessarily impact relationships and how you behave in them, other than what I was saying when you're younger, but also you may attract air signs and water signs. Air signs and fire signs, because of the way you carry yourself, the way that you carry on, behave. And that might not work out very well. Look at your Venus sign, look at your moon sign. If you have it in fire or air, you might be also interested in those types of people. Or even your Mars sign can be who you're attracted to. So if it's in like an air sign or a fire sign, although you're a Scorpio, you may gravitate towards those types of people and then be frustrated when they don't want to settle down as soon as you do. So, but you might have a bit of a contradictory nature. And it is false advertising for sure. People think that you're this very, what do they call it? Like the person who is a freewheeling type of person, free spirit. And somebody who is not impressed with trying to conform to the social standards. But then when they really, when you really get to know that other person that is impressed by you, they might take a step back and go, whoa, I did not see this coming. What is going on with this person? What is going on with this situation? And they can be really kind of concerned, I did not bargain for this. So, anyway, in terms of the type of career that you may gravitate towards, I talked about being a counselor. Also, I feel like anything with crisis management, there is that brave part of Scorpio, because it's like the cat with 9 lives, as well as just that Mars, because that would be to me the Pluto, that crisis. But Mars is a god of war, and it can be the person who is brave, who jumps into the battle, the warrior. So that can run the gamut from being in the military, being an EMT, a paramedic type of person. And you could have a very calm and mentally acute demeanor, where you're able to think under pressure because of it, and it doesn't faze you if you're dealing with a very intense situation. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.